As we all continue to enjoy our breakfast and, of course, each other's company, I'd like to call your attention to the program as it is. Hopefully everyone is comfortable where they're seated and has a program right in front of them. Go ahead and wave your program up if you have one. Sure no one's left out here? Great, great. You don't have one? I guess I'm done. Thank you. Okay. Well, as is customary in my culture, before I begin, I request the approval from an elder to continue. So before you look left and right of you to see who's the youngest, I'll give you the approval of one. Thank you very much. Okay. I greet you with great morning. Now, traditionally we say good morning, and it's just kind of routine, right? Good morning, good morning, good morning. But what happens when we change things up a bit? When we add on to it, when we take it a little bit higher, when we go great morning? How does it feel when you're greeted at work by someone with, hey, amazing day, isn't it? It takes you up a little bit higher, am I right? So I encourage you all right now to look to the person to the left of you and to the right of you and say, hey, great morning. Awesome morning. Yes. There you go. Change is good. Change is good. Now, with that being said, I'd like to acknowledge my Creator whose will is perfect. And in that same vein, I want to give honor to the head of this illustrious establishment of education here, President NESBARY. Thank you. I'd like to acknowledge one of the reasons I'm standing here today, head of Pathfinders right now, Dr. Pam Smith. All of our elected officials, I won't ask you to stand, but if you could just raise your hand, all of our elected officials, thank you very much. It is my hope and prayer that you continue to remain servants of this great community. And of course, I want to acknowledge those that have transitioned before us, all of our ancestors, because we truly stand on the shoulders of giants. Would you agree? Indeed. And of course, our keynote writer, producer, director, and keynote for the day, Mr. Frank Dawson. Thank you. It's events like this one that are needed because they serve to remind us to continue the work. They should be a refresher to those that are on the battlefield, and they should be reinvigorating events to fuel us to continue the journey ahead. It's events like this that serve as reminders because it's written, it's scripture that the harvest is ripe, but the laborers are few. And so we may not get to see each other over the course of the year because we're behind the scenes working adamantly, fervently towards the goal. You may be behind the veil, pulling levers and pushing buttons to influence change. So it's events like these that we get to remember that there's a head of public works and that influences change, and there's a director of admissions that influences change, and there's a prosecutor that owes me $20. And I'm just kidding, it's only 10. But it's truly these events that serve as reminders for us to continue the work, but not just continue, to further the work, to expound on the work, to build on the work of community building, of encouraging unity right here in our own backyard. As I close, I'll leave you with a poem entitled Change. The system's feeding us poison, calling it knowledge. The youth are getting sick, slowly but surely, from eating garbage. Well, it's a new diet. Try it. You'll probably hate it at first, but stick with it. It takes a minute. I guarantee that it works. Or your money's back and my head's on the guillotine. See, what I mean is we put a lot on the line every time we give up the dream of a modern-day Dr. King. We all are Superman to Metropolis, fighting for freedom's ring because mental slavery's locking us, propping us up to profit up office while we accepting them losses. Instead of youth being lawyers, now they want to be ballers that push them Benzes or Beamers, force Porsches, Ferraris, and Bentleys. Not that it's bad if you got one, but how'd you get it, you feel? See, we the future, said Wicked, but what we show them, they follow. Who's brave enough to stand up to the wicked mold and the model? We seeking pieces of people. This that my ox, so use it. If you got the power to lead it, trust me, don't abuse it. Thank you. As I take my seat, my last word is to encourage us all to continue to embrace change. Continue to be catalysts for change right here in your own community, in your own backyard. Continue to be encouragers and acceptors of change. To our elders, continue to operate with an open mind, that the youth that approach you with new and fresh ideas are received with a welcoming ear and heart. And our elders and our youth to implore the knowledge of your elders around you, knowing that I'm still green, still new, so there's a lot for me to learn. I encourage us all to utilize the change that we have right here, or as our keynote might put it, be agents of change. Thank you, Muskegon, and welcome to the 22nd Annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Unity Breakfast. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, everyone, for being here. You know, as opposed to recognizing some of our elected officials always recognize Muskegon Community Council's Board of Trustees, and I will ask them to stand as opposed to just simply wait. If you could be so kind, please stand and be recognized by the audience. Thank you, folks. And I always recognize our staff and our faculty. I usually recognize, and I think today is a very good day to do this, recognize our food service staff. Most of them, last night I think they might have gotten 1 hour of sleep, and a couple of them I know none. We had a major event last night opening a Stirrus Technology Center downtown, and you know, good work, folks. I'm amazed to see you here, so that's Now, some of you might know part of my background is working in for politicians after 1976. Including the Michigan legislature, the legendary mayor of the city of Dawson, and most recently, the Board of Trustees of Muskegon Community College. I know that we all get together, have nice breakfast, and have great conversation, and have a good time. But I hear a lot of people complaining about they don't like the way things are, and they just don't know what to do about it, don't do anything about it. Having been a person who's worked on campaigns again since 1976, the best advice I can give you is vote. V-O-T-E. One of my former students ran for political office, public office, in, where was it? County Commission, Oakland County. He lost. Guess how much he lost by? One vote. One vote. So, you know, he worked a little bit harder the next time he ran, and he won by 20,000 votes. So, you know, and I guess my mood is not one to listen to talk. My mood is one to recommend that if you have something you'd like to change in the society, don't tell me. Don't talk to your neighbors about it. Go out and vote. Your neighbors half of your neighbors never have ever voted. So don't count on yourselves. Get out there and make a change. If you see things you don't like, do that. That's the sage advice, hopefully sage advice that I have for you this morning, and hopefully to my lovely folks. I wasn't too much off on a rant, but I think that you know, I think we need to do more than eat, drink, and be merry. Get out and vote. Good morning. All right, if you would bow your heads with me, please. Eternal God, out of whose mind this great cosmos, cosmic universe was formed, we bless you. Help us in the moment of difficult decision. Oh God, make us willing to do your will, come what may.
Increase the number of persons of goodwill and moral sensitivity. Give us renewed confidence in nonviolence and the way of love. God, grant that we wage the struggle with dignity and discipline. May all who suffer oppression in this world reject the self-defeating method of retaliatory violence. God, remove all bitterness from our hearts and give us the strength and courage to face every new day. We thank you for our forefathers who've given us something in the midst of darkness, in the darkness of exploitation and oppression. Grant that we will go with the proper faith and proper determination of your will, so that we may be able to make a creative contribution to this world. God, help us as individuals and as a community to hear it now before it is too late. Seek ye first the kingdom of God and God's justice, and all the other things shall be added unto you. Amen. Amen.
Hello, I'm Dan Rinsky of Muskegon Community College, and I'm also on the Unity Breakfast Planning Committee. And at this point, we haven't done this before at the Unity Breakfast, but if I could have Chloe, game horn, come to the front. Every year we do the Unity Breakfast. This is the 22nd annual, and Baker and MCC helped to partner to put it on. And the proceeds, if we have any from the event, go to scholarships at both Baker College and Muskegon Community College. So on the screen you can see we've been doing this for many years, but over the last 2 years we've supported scholarships to these students at MCC and Baker. And so we would like to thank you for that, and also we wanted to have Chloe say a word of thanks as well. So Chloe.
Good morning, everybody. As you mentioned, I'm Chloe Scamhorn. I'm one of the recipients of the scholarship, and I just want to thank you all from the bottom of my heart for all the time and effort you put into this scholarship. I know it's helped me a ton. Last year at this time, I wasn't really enjoying my Christmas break. I was working 3 jobs every day, trying to save up enough money just to pay for my books and my tuition, and now I've not only been able to relax, but during the actual semester I have more time to study, and more importantly, sleep. So I'm very thankful for that, and everything that you guys are doing for us is just incredible, and I can't thank you enough.
Thank you to all to attend and help support the breakfast to make the program possible and also make scholarships possible. At this time, I'm going to turn it over to Mayor Kim Sims. That's the only place I wasn't looking. And she's going to take the next item of the program.
Good morning, everyone. I hope you all are enjoying yourselves thus far. The committee has worked very hard to make sure that this is an excellent event every year. And I know for me personally, it's always good to be able to look out and see our community come together. So I'm going to go ahead and get started because I'm really excited about this. So I'm going to just give you a few words that embody the person that I want to introduce to you this morning. Doer, passionate, confident, compassionate, advocate, diligent, a dedicated servant. They're just a few words that I picked out to describe this person this morning. And while not a Muskegon native or even a Michigan native, you would never know it, because when you go anywhere across the state and you mention this person's name or they ask you how this person is doing, it's always followed by a smile. Courageous, and she never backs down. I've never seen her back down from a challenge. Quite honestly, I've seen her embrace something. I'm looking at her like, are you serious? But she takes it head on. Adventurous. When I say adventurous, we're talking to the point where she will try things and break limbs doing it, and then tell you, I won't do that again. So, they have served this community on several boards and committees, a lifelong member of the NAACP, the branch here, and the recipient of over 20 awards and special honors. This person has given 44 years of political service to this community and was appointed the first female councilperson for the city of Muskegon Heights. A wife of 42 years, a mother of 2, and a member of the Mother's Ward of the Greater Harvest Missionary Baptist Church. That's my home church as well. Her feet have laid a path for females in government, and because of her sacrifices and her exemplary example and the best neighbor in the world, I stand before you honored to say that I'm the proud mayor of the city of Muskegon Heights that had a perfect role model whose feet I needed to fill. So please join me as we honor Muskegon Commission. Mayor, I call her endearingly Mayor Commission, because she will always be my mayor, Commissioner Williston Collins.
Joy to work with all of the people in this county. It gives me great pleasure. So I just want to thank you. Thank you so much.
Good morning, everyone. This is the point at which we will transition to our speaker, and I am here to introduce Mr. Frank Dawson. You have a bio in your program if you would like to learn more about him. I'm not going to follow that bio. I'm going to detour just a little bit. Many young black students entered college following the assassination of Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Mr. Frank Dawson was among that group. He completed his undergraduate studies at Cornell University and a master's at Newhouse School of Communication at Syracuse University. I was fortunate to meet him, I won't say how many years ago, in Syracuse, where I lived for a number of years, lived and worked. From the cold temps of upstate New York, he headed to California. As an executive at CBS and Universal, where he coordinated the development of many TV series that many in this room may fondly remember. Magnum P.I., Cagney and Lacey, and Miami Vice, to name a few. As an African-American executive, Dawson worked with actors Debbie Allen and Joe Morton to bring the black experience to the small screen in A Story of a People. He also worked with Robin Roberts of Good Morning America to develop The Other Side of Victory. And I would just add one other thing that really impressed me. We were at an event at the university, and Vanessa Williams, the former Miss America, passed Frank. And she looked back and she said, "Call me." I was like, whoa. So, enough of the name dropping. Today, Mr. Dawson is the interim Dean of Career Education at Santa Monica College Center for Media Design. Frank's proudest work, although completed several decades later, is co-producing and directing the documentary Agents of Change, the true story of the role that Black students at Cornell University played in the civil rights movement on campus following the death of Dr. King. Anybody that knew Frank over the years knew that this was in the works. Just took a while. It is my pleasure to welcome the 2018 MLK Unity Breakfast speaker, a producer, director, and educator, Mr. Frank Dawson.
Wow. Thank you for that wonderful introduction. It is, this is not my first time in Muskegon, Michigan. I was actually here, was it the early part of this year? Earlier this year, and I'm so happy to return and to be here again. A few things. This is such an important time in our country, and particularly at this time, to reflect on the fact that we are now in the 50th year since Dr. King was taken away from us. 50 years. 50 years is more than a minute. It's a little bit of time. So I thought that I would focus some of my conversation and thoughts about what has transpired over those 50 years and where we are today, and how Dr. King might grade us in terms of how we've done, in terms of the dream that he's laid out for us. And I thought I might tie it into some of my own personal experiences in terms of the impact that Dr. King had on myself and my life, and what I've been able to try to contribute toward what that dream was. My earliest recollection, first of all, let me congratulate all the folks who put in the time over the past 22 years to continue on with this Unity Breakfast. I mean, that is a commitment that I hope you are all so very proud of, and that another 22 years from now, perhaps, maybe you won't be the folks sitting in these seats, but something like this will continue to move forward. I live in Los Angeles, but I'm not a native Los Angelino. I was born in New York City, in Harlem, New York, and grew up in a public housing project on the Lower East Side of Manhattan. When Dr. Smith talked about my career in media and now my career in education, I could have never dreamed at that time that I would have any kind of career at all. I was completely disconnected as far as education is concerned. I had no thoughts about what education might do for me in my life, and I think that's one of the things that propelled me later in my career into education, because when I first started off in Crenshaw High School, I saw students sitting in those seats, and the look in their eyes was the same look that I had in my eyes when I was someone who was disconnected as far as education is concerned. I've always been curious about media images from the time I was a very young person, even though I was not interested in school. And one of my earliest remembrances of Dr. King is when I was 8 years old, actually. And I had heard Dr. King speak his voice on the radio, but I'd never really seen him or seen pictures of him. And there were there were three major newspapers in New York City at the time: the New York Times, the New York Post, and the Daily News. Unlike today, the New York Times didn't have any pictures. It was all print, and they prided themselves on that. It was about the words. The Post and the Daily News, however, were different. Dr. King had been speaking in Harlem, and he was attacked by a woman with a letter opener, and he was stabbed. That picture was on the front page of the Daily News and the New York Post. And for the first time, I saw an image of Dr. King. And at 8 years old, I will never forget the grimace on his face as he went through the pain of that particular attack. And I was struck by that in terms of connecting the voice and then seeing the man and then continuing on what he continued to do in spite of the danger that he knew was out there. For the rest of his life, he continued to move forward. I was impressed by that at the age of 8 years old. Later on, the things as far as education is concerned that really changed my life were, again, this interest in images and in storytelling. Although I hated school, I didn't turn in work, I was an avid reader. My older sister had a voracious appetite for reading books, and she'd finish a book, she'd just throw it at me. You know? And I'd take the book and I'd read the book, and I got into this series of reading books. And because I read books, I always did well on standardized exams. So while I was failing my classes, getting poor grades in school, the principal of the school would come through on the citywide exams and rattle off the names of the students who had done well on the exams. And then he'd name those names, and then he'd go, Dawson, what a waste. But still, the reading is what kept me on an academic track as far as school is concerned. And I was so happy to hear the band this morning and to talk to Mayor here in terms of music, because music helped save my life as well. My mother made sure that I got into music class because that kept me on an academic track as well when the school wanted to put me on a vocational track. And that leads me to another thing in terms of talking about education. I could not be prouder to be here at a community college. In California, the role of community college is evolving. At a time when I was coming up, community college was meant for those who could not go on further with academic work immediately. It was called vocational, kind of vocational education track. Today, the importance of economic development in our country and providing opportunities and moving forward, the bulk of that work is being done at the community colleges. And in California, where we have 114 community colleges, there's a tremendous commitment to that effort as far as the state is concerned in terms of funding and recognition. And so I'm very happy to be here at a community college. So moving on with Dr. King and his life and what was happening in the civil rights movement. Television during that time was restricted to only 3 television channels. It was ABC, it was NBC, it was CBS. That was it. That was it. And when we talk about the whole idea of integration and representations of all people, television was really devoid of that. We had a small 14-inch Emerson black and white television set in my mother's apartment where I lived. And we didn't have a telephone. And our neighbor upstairs would see something on television, and she would tap on the steam pipes. And that was a signal for my mother to stick her head out the window. And she would say, Esther, Esther, colored people on TV. That's how rare it was to find images of African American people on television. And so the sensibility as a child that I developed is that it was a white world, because we rarely got to see those images. Certainly Ed Sullivan broke down some doors. We began to see entertainers, on television and television images. And I bring up this whole thought and question about images because one of the things that were not predicted in terms of our evolution as a society and a so-called democracy is the role that television and media and images would play in that. Some of it very positive. In terms of what was happening with the civil rights struggle, getting back to Dr. King and the struggle that was going on in the South to end segregation, without television, the majority of the country and the majority of the world would not have known about that struggle. And it was, in fact, those violent depictions of people being water hosed, of the dogs, so you all remember those images, that television played a role in that, and that was important as far as television is concerned. One of the issues, however, is that as far as the gatekeepers, the people who control what images get on television, was not representative of the full spectrum of people in our country. Those decisions were made by other people. I had no idea that I would end up in media at some point, and those of you who come to attend this screening of Agents of Change, hopefully, after this breakfast, will get a sense of that. But it was actually my participation in that event that led me into a career in media. And to just give you a little tidbit about that, is that I was at Cornell University in my freshman year, and I was involved in a building takeover to expand the curriculum at the college, to bring in more professors of color, and to begin to include, as far as the learning was concerned, the contributions of people of color. During that, there was a violent altercation in which there's some things that we did that made it a national story. And once it became a national story, I had to, in the building, the phone service was still on, and I was able to call my mother and let her know that I was okay. And my mother was crying on the telephone because she was afraid for my safety. And my mother said, "What are you doing? What are you doing? You could have stayed home in the projects and gone to jail." And I said to my mother, "Ma, that is not what's happening. That's not what's happening here." And I'm my mother's only son. I have sisters, and my mother's only son. My mother always believed what I was telling her. And my mother would not believe what I was telling her. And she said, no, that can't be happening because I heard it on the news. I said, whoa. This is someone that my mother does not know, that she believes over her own son just because it was on the news. That was a heavy revelation for me in terms of the importance of media. I was a government major at the time. I changed my major to media and communications, and I got on the student radio the next semester. And it opened up a completely new world to me. Now, again, getting back to the civil rights movement and the images and the use of media, it should be no great surprise to those who are aware of the impact and the influence of media that we would get to a point where this whole idea of celebrity and the impact that it has on our country and on our views and how we ascribe importance not just to issues, but to people as well. Having worked in the television industry was a really important experience for me because working on the shows that were mentioned and meeting people who work in that industry, I have always had a difficult time understanding why all of these people should be worshipped. There are some people in media who are good, wonderful people. There are people in the media who are terrible people. Yet just because they're in the media, we ascribe this certain level of importance to them and the whole idea of celebrity. Same thing with films and television. And so if we think about the situation that we're in right now, as far as the leadership of our country is concerned, that's something we need to focus on in terms of where we're at with this celebration of celebrity. Okay? There's talk right now about other celebrities throwing their hat in the ring for the next presidential race. And I think that's something that we should be concerned about. Okay? It's one thing to be a champion for people and to get coverage in the media for that, but just to be on a reality show, to get that level of importance to allow you to become president of the United States, that's something we should be concerned about moving forward. So again, as far as Dr. King is concerned, in 1968, on April 4th, I was a senior in high school, and it was my younger sister's birthday. And I'll never forget that day. And where I was on a train, actually, heading back to boarding school, if you can believe. That's a whole nother chapter of my story in terms of how that happened. But when I was 15 years old, I got an opportunity to get out of the projects by integrating a boarding school in Westchester County, New York. Again, because of the reading and my ability to do well on standardized exams. My best friend was the first African-American student. At that time, we were Negro. He was the first Negro student to go to the school, and I became the second Negro student at that school in 1968. The pain of that day, in terms of not just the symbol of Dr. King, but his level of commitment on that day at 18 years old. I was angry. I was disillusioned. It was a very, very, very difficult period in my life. But at the same time, in my senior year, it also gave me some thoughts about what I wanted to do with my life in terms of the importance that I might be able to lend toward Dr. King's dream. And that's why I point to, again, the fact that 50 years have passed. And I think if Dr. King would give us a scorecard at this point, there would be some disappointments. I think about some of the things that we're involved in today outside of education, and some things that are being driven by technology. And I wonder what Dr. King would think about selfies. What would Dr. King think about selfies? I mean, this whole idea in terms of what the challenges are that we face in terms of external reach and looking and recognizing others, that we instead decide to turn the phone this way, to look at ourselves and to take pictures of ourselves. That's something important to consider. I don't think Dr. King would have been into taking selfies. Reality television. The Real Housewives of Atlanta. How would Dr. King feel about the Real Housewives of Atlanta in terms of the representations of, particularly as far as African Americans are concerned, the representations of relationships and family and all of those things? What would be the scorecard on a show like that? One of the things that I've learned in working in television, and it's really curious, is about reality television. Because reality television is not real. Reality television is not real. And so these designations that we give, think about the terminology, once again. And toward the end of my speech, I want to talk a little bit about media literacy, which is the discipline that I taught in when I was faculty for 15 years, and the need for media literacy education so that to help us to be able to move forward. So, reality television, Survivor. Survivor has been on the air for, goodness, was it approaching 20 years now? Long time, right? Reality television, people competing, different things. you're banished from the island. People take a vote and you get banished from the island, right? They take the light out of your torch, you walk across the bridge, and you're supposed to be in some remote area somewhere, right? What happens when they walk across the bridge? They go to the hotel. And you know, again, this relationship that we have with television and media, and I want to harp on this because it has a lot to do with the situation that we're in right now as a nation. So this whole idea of, again, reality television, you have to look beyond what's on the screen to what's behind all of that. So if all of these folks are secluded in a remote area somewhere, who's shooting the pictures? You know, who's doing the sound work? There's a whole crew there. They're not by themselves anywhere. But anyway, we call these things like reality television. Reality television. So the idea of celebrity, reality television, and again, its impact in terms of where we are today. Music. We get to media literacy, talk about the impact of music. Those of you who come to see the film Agents of Change, one of the characters in the film is the music in the film. It's 12 classic songs from that era in the late 1960s into the 1970s. The music talked in a different way about the struggles that we were going through during that time and kind of carried us forward and lifted us up. It didn't denigrate the relationships that we were having with others. It didn't call women out of their names. You know, it was a different time, and it's important that we reflect back on that time and the role that music had in that as well. Music can be a truly unifying force because the way we process music and those sounds doesn't necessarily begin here, but it begins here. We can sit in a movie theater with people who are completely not like us, have completely different experiences than we have, but there becomes a point in the movie where something dramatic is happening and there's this music swell and you could feel everybody in the theater go, and they feel the same thing in the same way. And that's one of the things that really kind of unites us as human beings, is having that common experience and knowing that we all feel the same way about something at the same time. And so the use of music in terms of media and images is critical as well. And we can get some determination of where we are as a society by listening to the music. Now the music of today, a lot of the music it's angry, but some of the music in the 1960s was angry, but it was angry in a different way. It was a way that also offered some solutions and some hope and some ways of moving forward. And at this critical time in our nation, we all need some inspiration and ways to move forward. Dr. King, in the movement that he built, that he did not build alone. I had the great pleasure a number of years ago to meet Ralph David Abernathy's daughter, Donzale Abernathy, who had written a book about her father and his relationship with Dr. King and the role that Dr. Abernathy played in the civil rights movement. And after Martin was taken away from us, what he did to continue moving that forward as well in terms of the Poor People's Movement and the continuing contributions of the SCLC, the Southern Christian Leadership Conference. And one of the things that they all focused on was the fact that the movement could not move forward simply on the backs of the African American population. That it took a coalition of people coming together in order for that to happen. In terms of the dogs, you know, being thrust upon the people, the African Americans, so initially, you know, launched the civil rights movement and were involved in that. Once white celebrities became involved in that, you didn't see dogs. Okay? Once the religious community embraced that, as far as the coalition is concerned, a different response, both from law enforcement and from the media. As I look around this room today, the tapestry of different folks who've committed to attend this celebration on a regular basis is critical and is important and is something that needs to be acknowledged. There's no one single group that's going to solve the ills that our nation faces right now. It takes a coalition of people coming together in order to solve this problem. I did write down one of the quotes that Dr. King made in that regard in his "I Have a Dream" speech, which is interesting if you get a chance to sit down and reflect on that and look at what that meant when in 1963 and what it means today. But one of the quotes that he made was, "The marvelous new militancy which has engulfed the Negro community must not lead us to distrust all white people. For many of our white brothers, as evidenced by their presence here today, have come to realize that their destiny is tied with our destiny. They have come to realize that their freedom is inextricably bound to our freedom. We cannot walk alone. And as we walk, we must make the pledge that we will always march ahead. We cannot turn back." And so I ask at this moment, over the course of the past 50 years, certainly as in most movements, there are times when we move forward a couple of steps and then we have to take a step back. And then we move forward a few more steps and then we have to step back a bit. Where are we at right now? Because my concern is that we are not hearing enough voices challenging who we say we are as opposed to who we appear to be as a nation. And so this is an opportunity for all of us personally to take a look at what kinds of contributions we are making individually and how we can come together with others to make a deeper commitment. It's hard for me to remember a time in my own lifetime where there has been a greater challenge than the one that we face today. Who are we going to be? We are at a critical juncture in that regard. And just talking about it is not enough. We must truly become doers once again. We must move forward. I mentioned a little earlier about media literacy. Just in something tangible as far as being able to move together. I mentioned earlier one of the issues that we face in terms of people, our educational system, which is still geared toward developing critical thinking through literature and words, when we've transitioned into a time in which visual images are the most powerful images that we have today and have the most impact as far as people are concerned. Yet we have not adjusted our educational system to teach people to ask critical questions about information. information literacy and media literacy is critical. And it's a very easy process to adopt. There are 5 key questions that you should learn to ask about all information that's presented to you, and 5 core concepts that surround the area of media literacy. When we talk about how people interpret information so differently from one another, when we look at the same messages, first question asked is, who created this message? You see advertisements, you see pronouncements made on television. First thing you should think about, who is this coming from? It's not just the person who's reading the information, it's the organization who's behind this. Who is this coming from? Okay, and what do they have to gain from it? What creative techniques are they using to attract my attention? Because none of it is happenstance. It's all very deliberate. As I talk about how music impacts people and makes people feel a certain way, it's the same thing about visual images. The color red is a hot color. We feel a certain way when we see advertisements that use red. The color blue is a cool color. We feel a certain way when we see advertisements that use the color blue. There are things that we don't think about, but they're impacting us, and we need to ask what techniques are being used. When you see a film, you see the angle that the director is taking and looking at a character. If you want the audience to feel that the character is powerful, there's a low angle on the person, looking up at the person. The image feels large. You want to diminish how the audience feels about the character, there's a high angle on the character, and the character is less powerful. You know, we don't think about these things, but those are images that are happening all the time, and we're impacted and influenced by them. And it's been used in political campaigns in terms of how we feel about candidates. Very important to understand. How might different people, understand this message differently than myself? Which is a critical one when we talk about collaborations and people coming together. I like to use the Rodney, most of you remember the Rodney King incident in Los Angeles years ago, and then the trial happened, and the officers were, everybody saw the video of the officers beating Rodney King over and over and over again. And you had a divergence of 2 different sides of the aisle that people came out on in terms of whether these officers were guilty of some crime or not, right? Well, if you were a police person who lived in the Simi Valley area of Los Angeles, which is an area where a lot of police people live, and police officers are your neighbors, and you go to barbecues in their backyard and everything, and you know them to be decent people. So you see that image of them beating Rodney King, and you say, he must have been doing something really wrong for those officers to have to carry out their job in that way. That's how you feel about that image. If you're somebody in which the police come into your community and you're stopped for no reason at all, and your relationship with the police is one of these, then your reaction to that video is, there go the police once again beating up a brother. Okay? Same video, same activity, 2 completely different ways of evaluating that just based on what your own personal experience is. The better we understand that, the better we're able to communicate and get along with other people and appreciate that they can think differently think differently than us. And so there's a different way we need to communicate with them because we have that understanding. And it's valid that they think a different way than we do about something that we've both seen at the same time. The lifestyles and points of views that are represented also, and not just what's in the message, but what's left out of the message, what's not being said, what information are we not being given? And lastly, why is this message being sent? Why is this message being sent? And then that connects to the 5 core concepts. All media messages and information are constructed. They're put together by someone. It's usually a group of people, okay? And they sit down and they get together, and if you've ever had an opportunity to look at an advertising reel, when advertisers are presenting a message for a client, they present a rough cut to them, and they have a voice track behind it explaining everything that's on the screen, all the images, and why they're there. And there's one with McDonald's, and I mean, you think about how closely they dissect it. They said the little girl in the pink dress is wearing pink because of this, that, and the other. The polka dots on her shoes are there because we want people to feel that that's da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. It's that detailed in terms of how messages are constructed. They're all put together by somebody, okay? They're constructed using a creative language with its own rules. Again, people experience the same message differently. Media have embedded values and points of view, and most importantly, most media messages are organized to gain profit or power. All media messages are designed to gain profit and or power. Profit and or power. And until we start to think critically about information, we will continue to find ourselves in situations in which we feel we are powerless. And we have to wrest control away from that information and invest it in ourselves. Going back to music, there's a song, I think, before I open up for a couple of questions, before I have to wrap it up. Originally done by Harold Melvin and the Blue Notes. That I thought, again, if you revisit those lyrics, you'll see how appropriate they are for where we are today and what we need to do to move forward. And it's called Wake Up Everybody. I was hoping to play that song for you this morning, unable to, but the opening stanza, wake up everybody, no more sleeping in bed, no more backward thinking, time for thinking ahead. All the lyrics about that in terms of encapsulate what we need to do today in order to move forward and truly honor both the memory and the commitment of Dr. King. We cannot let the dream die. It is incumbent upon us to continue each and every day, in each and every way, to move the dream forward. Okay? Education is the key. Collaboration is the key. Coming together, like-minded people. Because the reality is that the more people who are kind of disenfranchised and feel that this particular direction that our country is heading in today is the right direction, the more people that we can reach that feel that way, that understand that their best interests and the interests of other like-minded people who may not look like them are one and the same, that is how our nation will live up to the promise and deliver on Dr. King's dream. Thank you. I would like to open up to some comments or questions or thoughts that you might have. Oh, students now. we're at a community college. I guess I can't do what I do in the classroom and call on people. Yes, sir.
I was here when you brought Agents of Change to the campus. I was wondering where we might go to see another screening of that.
That screening will be today in the Stevenson Center today at 9:30. And thank you. I really encourage you all, not just because I'm the producer, director of this film, but this film has been resonating for the last year and a half all across the country. It's been in and globally. It's been to Germany, it's been to France, we've been to Montreal, we've been to Toronto. We've been in most major cities across this country and smaller places as well. And the whole idea of being an agent of change, some depictions of the importance of Dr. King in this film, and Julian Bond in this film, and so many others, and kind of takes a look at this intersection of the civil rights movement and the Black Power movement. And that's another thing that I didn't get a chance to talk about, because again, coming out of high school, I was, definitely nonviolent, Dr. King, you know, turn the other cheek. And after Dr. King was killed, if you look at the student movement at that time and embracing of Stokely Carmichael's idea of black power and really focusing on that, not taking a violent turn, but there was a tremendous turn as far as young people are concerned. Because again, we're at a college here, and we're at a community college, it's so important that we continue to reach out to our young people. Because in terms of moving these things forward, it's going to take, when I talk about a coalition between different races of people, it's about different generations also. This is a world that they're going to inherit. And for them not to play a role in terms of this change would be a critical mistake. We have to have our young people involved. And I recognize that even more now because 8 months ago I became a grandfather for the first time. And for myself, I just started saying, dang, I better start taking better care of myself. Because I need to be around to help this young man as he grows, to lend some of the experiences from my generation, our generation, which I still value so greatly. And I value even more the commitments of my parents' generation, because I know on whose shoulders I stand. And it's important for our children to know on whose shoulders they stand. One last thing. When we talk about knowing more about our history and African Americans, one of the presentations I made with the film was in Broward Community College in Florida. And in the Q&A session, there was a young student in the front row who was crying. And I called on her and asked what her problem was after seeing the film. And she said, Mr. Dawson, I am so ashamed. I am so ashamed of the fact that I'm an African American Studies major, and I'm a B- student. I had no idea what it took for me to be sitting in this seat. The sacrifices that the people who came before me made so that I might occupy that seat. I'm so embarrassed that I haven't been giving my all and giving my best. And so that's an example of just a little bit of information, sharing that just changed this student's commitment completely. She said, from now on, I'm going to be an A student. I really appreciate what it took, and I'm not going to let you down. So, reaching out to the young people, critical. Yes?
I have a question regarding a global perspective, in your opinion, as the oncoming generation embraces the work. What would you feel would be Dr. King's overall grade on a global scale?
On a global scale, that's a really interesting question. Much of Dr. King's work, unlike what came along later as far as revelations are concerned by Malcolm X, when he traveled to the Far East and that were pretty much different. I think winning the Nobel Peace Prize by Dr. King elevated that to another stage of recognition in terms of the importance that the work that was being done here in America is globally. I think that Peace Prize did that tremendously. But there are many nations across the country that are experiencing similar things that we are here. People of color are catching hell everywhere. And it is not unusual to travel a lot and see that, again, in different societies, different countries all across the world, the people on the lowest rung of the economic ladder and educational ladder are the darker skinned peoples. And I think he'd still give us not a good rating as far as that is concerned. But I think also he'd be very concerned because of our leadership position as a nation for so long. The message that we're being sent, that we're sending globally in terms of our thoughts about human rights and about others, very negative. I think he'd be tremendously concerned about that. Yes?
I've heard several inspiring discussions over the years, and sometimes I'm in a quandary, where do I grab on? I can see stuff's messed up, and I can see that I want to step up and help it change. It's just sometimes you don't know where to grab on, especially in racial relations.
Let me ask you this. do you ever talk with your friends about issues concerning race that are also white?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And are they usually only like-minded people?
No.
Ah. And how do you approach them? What do you say?
Usually some sarcasm, like, oh, how did you get? You have someone with brown skin living in our neighborhood, or, you know, and then I try to get into more discussion, but it's just not enough.
Your first line might not have been the best approach. It's, you know, I find usually a better approach, instead of contradicting or being counter to where they are, sometimes if we just say yes and instead of no, yes and then to share with them a different perspective, sometimes that can be more effective.
So you're saying personal is good. I mean, I do that, but I want to take it to another level.
What community organizations are you involved in?
Progressive Democratic Women, Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm. And what kind of outreach do you do with that?
I haven't followed the agenda, and I don't want to.
I'm not sure exactly what to suggest, but it sounds like you're doing some of the right things, but you need to deepen your commitment in terms of understanding how vast the problem is, and again, clearly reaching out to other people who will not think differently, of people that you don't know, that won't think a certain way about you just because of the way you look, and be on guard about things, you know, but don't always preach to the choir. Find people who think differently than you and have conversations with them and try to bring them further into the circle of understanding a little bit more. Yes, ma'am.
There's enough people here right now. Don't you think that the people here right now can start communicating the history of the fight? What happens, a lot of our white young kids, they don't know nothing about the fight, but you do. Black people here, our kids don't want to hear it. It's a time now, I see what happened this morning and yesterday. I'm 87 years old, and I'm sick of the fight. I'm sick of it because we ignore it. It's hard to go and try to convince somebody of all the racism that we've been through all of our lives. I'm one of them. And it's time now. I'm so sick of what's happening now in the United States. We're supposed to be the best state it is in the world. And it is ignorance and not listening to each other. I don't care whether you white, black, or brown. I'll tell you about my fight. If you don't want to listen, I got a loud mouth and I talk about it. So I want a commitment. I love Muskegon. And the Lord blessed me to move up with all the fights. I moved up. My husband didn't move up like I did. Finally, he had a time. But I tell you, commitment, I hug white people, brown people, black people, everybody I'm hugging, okay? But I'm going to quit hugging you. We don't get committed. We have to be committed. And the president, I'm nonpartisan. But I'm so glad I didn't vote for that man.
I thank you so much. Now that's what I'm talking about. Because we should be in a period of outrage. 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 So many voices, we should be outraged today. And we certainly need more of that. Thank you so much, ma'am. Thank you so much. Yes, ma'am.
My family seems don't say anything. I'm Dolores Cole. this Martin Luther King breakfast. Also was on that committee. But I am so disturbed because of the fact that we can come to a breakfast of this magnitude and yet and still we can't get 50 people tomorrow. We can't get you to get past the breakfast. There's so many things in Muskegon. We are going back to the 60s. Our employment, there was a time that we marched so that we could get jobs in the retail. Now, the only stores that have them mostly is your anchor stores. But yet and still, we're complacent. We've got a job, so we don't have to worry about what else is happening. But we've got children that's coming along, that's getting out of college, that need jobs and can't find them. But yet we're complacent. We like to come and have a dinner. We like to come and have a breakfast and pat each other on the shoulder, you know. But it's time now that we do some work.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right.
And NAACP need to be doing something. Because of the fact that it's too many things that's going wrong in this town. I was born, raised here. And I know when I went to get a job at a 5 and 10 cent store, and I was in the 8th grade, and the white girl that had dropped out of school in the 8th grade, she had the job. So she asked me to come and apply. So when I got there, they said it's changed. You have to be a high school graduate now. Because of the color. So these same things are happening now, and it's very subtle. That's right. And don't tell me you don't know about it, because you do. Okay? Let's get busy and do something, other than just sit around the table and talk about it.
All right.
Thank you very much. So thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope that this is not the last time I come and visit Muskegon. I enjoyed my time here tremendously. I had a great dinner last night, and I was so impressed with the folks that I had dinner with. In fact, the fact that they were born in Muskegon, some went away to get further education, but they've come back to this city to apply their talents here and to help move this city forward. So there's a deep commitment from the local homegrown folks that you have here, and I was so much encouraged by that. Living in Los Angeles is not a city, it's a big town, but it's a big disconnected town. It's a place where people get in their cars and roll up their windows, and they never have to rub shoulders with people who are not like them if they don't want to. And that's a difficult place to live in that regard. You have a tremendous opportunity here in being a much smaller community to be honest with one another and to find ways in which you can work together to move the agenda forward. So I really have a lot of respect for this community and other communities like this. And I encourage you to make a commitment of recognizing the issues that continue to persist here and addressing them and joining in coalitions and helping things to change here.